Good morning, my friends, and welcome. Well, I mean, I say morning, but it's actually afternoon at the moment. But you're going to be watching this in the morning if you're actually watching it. So I should be saying good morning because that's when you're going to be watching it, even though it's actually the afternoon. It feels weird to say good morning in the afternoon. It is good that you are here, and welcome to the Word Wednesday Word with Mitch. We are going through the book of Philippians, and today we're going to be looking at the chapter 1, verses 9 to 11. Before I read that to you, I want to remind you of some of the things that we learned last week. Now, if you didn't tune in last week, you wouldn't have learned them last week, and I'm not reminding you of anything. I'm just telling you something completely new. But that's okay. That's why I'm doing it. We learned last week that Paul is writing from a prison in Rome. And he's writing to his friends, people he genuinely loves. He says they're his partners. The word partner in the Greek is koinonia, which has this kind of intimate, beautiful friendship that's going on between them. He's writing to his friends, his partners, his koinonias in Philippi. And we heard, or Paul tells us in verse 30, that they are going through a very similar situation to him. Let me read to you what he says about them, the people he's writing to, the people in Philippi, in verse 30 of chapter 1. He says, "For it has been granted to you, you Philippians, on behalf of Christ, not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for him, since you are going through the same struggle you saw I had, and now you hear that I still have." He's writing to his friends, people that he loves, who are suffering a very similar thing to him. Maybe they're in prison, maybe they're not, maybe they've got the threat of prison. But one thing we are for sure and certain about is that his friends are suffering. Now in verses 9 to 11, he's going to tell us what he is praying for them, for his friends, people that he loves who are suffering. But I want you to pause just for a second and think about this. If you heard that one of your friends was suffering, someone that you love dearly, one of your koinonias, one of your partners, one of your intimate friendships was suffering, what would you pray for them? They might be suffering right now. Maybe you have friends that are suffering in this COVID-19 kind of world. What are our main prayers for people at this moment? My friends, if you're anything like me and most of the people around me, when we pray for our friends who are suffering, what do we pray for? Most of the time, my friends, we pray that God would stop their suffering. That seems like a pretty natural prayer to pray in these moments when we have people that we love who are suffering. Oftentimes I think of this, like when my daughter, if she's being annoyed by anyone, like just by me, because I can be a super annoying dad, or her brother or sister, my daughter Harper, she'll often just cry out like this. She'll go, "Stop it!" It's like this beautiful, cute little kind of singing moment. So Lara will be annoying her. She'll be like, "Stop it!" Sometimes I think like the content of our prayers is kind of like that, right? We're constantly looking to God. We're saying, "God, stop it! Stop this stuff that is happening to me. Stop this thing that is happening to my friends." Most of the time, our prayers are always for the external circumstances that we are facing or that our friends are facing, right? We want something to change in the external world around us that will better suit us. But now, just for a moment, listen to the prayer that Paul prays for his friends. "And this is my prayer," he says. Now, here's where we expect him to go, "I pray that you guys won't have to suffer anymore, that you'll be let out of prison, and then your life will be fantastic." Bow. Listen to what he says. "And this is my prayer," in verse 9, "that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depths of insight, so that you may be able to discern what is best and may be pure and blameless on the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of our God." My friends, isn't that fascinating? He's not praying for their external circumstances at all. What's he praying for? He's praying for their internal life, for who they are, and for what they do in the midst of all of their suffering. He's praying that their love will abound, that it will overflow more and more, that they will know, that they will have wisdom, and they will not shrink back from the people around them, from loving the people around them. He's not praying for their external circumstance. He is praying for their internal character and the way that that character comes out in the things that they do. Now, my friends, I want you to think of this. Think back to all the prayers that you've prayed this week or last week or from the beginning of this whole saga, this whole crisis that we're going through. How many of them have been about external circumstances? Please stop this. Please make this happen for me. Please do this for my friend. How many of them have been like that? And how many of them, in contrast, have been about the kind of people that you are, the kind of character that you have, and the kind of actions that you take based on the kind of person that you are? Are you following me, my friends? Most of our prayers are about external circumstances, at least mine are. And this passage is challenging me to care more about the kind of person that I am and God making me that kind of person through the power of the Spirit than the circumstances that I'm facing. I had this beautiful story actually that kind of like rams this home for me, if you want to think about it like that. It's about a bunch of kids at school. They're at a Christian school, and like ours, I guess. And they were asked to kind of draw a picture, these primary school kids, draw a picture of a prayer that they had. And you could imagine like what all these primary school kids are drawing. You know, there's one kid with like a bunch of balloons because he wants to have like a wonderful birthday. There's another kid who draws a bike because he wants God to give him a bike. And this one kid, his name was Joe. And he draws a picture. You know what his picture is? He draws this picture. He must have been a good artist. I haven't seen this picture, but he must have been a good artist because he draws a picture of his back deck, the back deck of his house, and there's kind of trees and the sun's going down. And he draws a picture on that back deck of him and Jesus sitting together, and they're having a conversation. And you know what he says? This boy Joe, you know what this boy Joe says in his picture? He says, "I love you, Jesus." And Jesus, like a little speech bubble, says, "I love you, Joe." And then Joe speaks again in a different speech bubble. And he says, "Jesus, help me to love." And Jesus says, "I will, Joe." Isn't that beautiful? The rest of those kids, I mean, it's fine, right? They're praying for stuff, for things, for their external circumstances. But Joe, he learned something beautiful about prayer. The thing that matters to Paul most, the thing that matters to God most, is not the external circumstances that you find yourself in. It's the kind of person that you are in the midst of all of those circumstances. Because the kind of person you are will lead to the kind of actions that you take. So our prayer for you, my friends, is that your love would abound more and more, that even in the midst of this suffering and this crisis, you will not stop loving. In fact, this very moment will only help to increase your love, your knowledge, your depth of insight, and your righteousness more and more and more. My friends, my challenge to you this week is, let's stop praying about our external circumstances for a moment. Pray that we ourselves, that our hearts might be changed. And pray that the hearts of our friends might be changed so we'll be more like Jesus, so that our love for others will abound more and more and more and more. Because, my friends, that's what matters the most. And that's what we should be praying for. I hope that's been helpful. It's certainly been helpful for me. A challenge. Pray this week for who you are and what you do, for who your friends are and what they do, and less so about the external circumstances around us. Amen.